Thank you for coming. I'm Sheriff Mike Lucas from the Portage County Sheriff's Office. I'm just going to read a little thing before we get going so we have some ground rules for the meeting tonight. I thank everybody for attending this meeting. We are here to discuss the release of Peter Yogers. I believe everyone here has an interest in the release of Mr. Yogers. Tonight's meeting will begin with a brief description of Mr. Yogers' release. We will then introduce all panel members, and each member will offer information in the related field. To have respect and orderly meeting, we do have some rules for tonight's meeting. Nobody on this panel said this man needs to be released or recommends his release. The court has decided that the risk of Mr. Yogers has been lowered and he is therefore ready to be released. State statute allows us to provide a meeting to educate the public about the process. To that end, we are taking the opportunity to provide information and answer your questions. This meeting is for you, the community. We are holding this meeting to share information, explain the sex offender register release process, dispel rumors, quell fears, and to offer some safety ideas. Upon completion of the introductions, we will take a short break. During the break, you will have the opportunity to write your questions on a note card and to submit it to the panel. Only questions on the note cards will be answered. During this meeting, there will be no verbal outbursts or arguing. Each person in this room has an interest in the release of Mr. Yogers. There are possibly past victims of sexual abuse in this room and family members of victims. Therefore, every person will demonstrate respect and support to each other, or they will be asked to leave. We are asking for your patience as we get to each person's questions. After the meeting, we will be available for a short period to answer questions, any additional follow-up questions if you have, rather than ask personally. In addition, we might not have all the information available to answer some of your questions. If that occurs, please provide your telephone number and we will try to find the necessary information and call back as soon as practical. In accordance with Wisconsin Statute 301.46, parent 2M, we have decided to have a meeting to share information about Mr. Yogers. On 5/3 of 95, Mr. Yogers was committed under Chapter 980 Sexual Violent Persons Law. On July 23, 2015, the court ordered a supervised release plan be developed for Mr. Yogers. A hearing was held and the court approved a supervised release plan on December 5, 2016. On or before January 4, 2017, he will be released to the community supervision administered by the Wisconsin Department of Corrections and the Wisconsin Department of Family Services. This meeting is not intended to increase fear, but rather it is our belief that an informed public is a safer public. Mr. Yogers' convictions are on 5/3 of 95 second-degree sexual assault, on 5/3 of 95 intimidating a witness. The release date this next week, he will be released in the town of Alvin, Portage County. This is not his county of residence at the time of his conviction. Mr. Yogers will reside at 4068 State Highway 49. He will be on supervision with the Department of Corrections until 2/15 of 2018. Upon release, he will be placed on intensive supervision and will be subject to the Wisconsin Department of Corrections Electronic Monitoring Program, or called EMP, and Global Positioning System, GPS. Mr. Yogers will be required to register with the Wisconsin Sexual Offender Register Program for life. The Wisconsin Sexual Register can be located at www.widocOffenders.org. The summary of Mr. Yogers' offenses was Mr. Yogers forced his way into a residence of a known adult female, locked the door, grabbed a knife, threatened to kill a female, and sexually assaulted the female. Today, what I'm going to do is introduce the other members of the panel. They're going to give their take on what their part of the release is, and then we are going to take our break and have you write down some questions after that. So, on the end?
Okay. My name is Kurt Radetsky. I'm from the Department of Corrections. I am with the Sex Offender Registration Program. So basically what I do is for the surrounding counties, which I have, including Portage County, I supervise and try to make sure everybody is registered on the registry. So if you're required by law to either be a 15-year or a life registrant, I'm the person you call for questions on that. The things that I want you to leave with today, I've left a whole bunch of handouts right over there on that counter. I've got my card there. There's a whole bunch of handouts about what the sex offender registry is about. There are different phone numbers to call. We have tip lines. We have all information about the registry and what individuals are required to do. Now, the registry does a couple different things. We monitor people who are actually on supervision, which means they have a probation and parole agent, and we also supervise people who do not have a probation and parole agent. So once they're done with their supervision with a probation or parole agent and they still have to register with us, there are some rules that they have to follow. The rules that they're required to follow is letting us know where they live, where they go to school, if they ever change jobs, if they're going to be volunteering with anybody, and any other information that we have in our pamphlet here that I'll let you guys look at. I think one thing that you have to know is that once a person is off of supervision, they do not have the same requirements as a person does who is on supervision. They can't have contact with minors. They cannot work with them. You know, they cannot be around them in a volunteering way, but they can be around minors. We get a lot of calls about a female who may call, or a concerned parent or grandparent saying, hey, my daughter-in-law has kids, but there's a sex offender living with her and she has children. We can't do anything about that. A lot of people don't understand that, but once a person has done their time in their office supervision, there's not much that we can do about it. I just wanted to give you a few updates on how many people are on supervision here and not on supervision. So right now in Portage County, as of this morning, the non-incarcerated total people, adult and non-incarcerated total is 161. Okay? And then we come down to the terminated adult, or terminated total. Terminated total means the total number of people who are not under the supervision of a probation and parole agent, and that's 107. Our compliance rate for people on the registry is like in a 90 percentile. So some of the people who don't register, we track them down, we make a referral, and we will have those people charged or convicted as the DAC is appropriate. So that's the big part of the registry. I think one of the big things that we have to make sure everybody knows here, and I'm going to take this right out of the pamphlet because it's pretty well true. Not all sex offenders are known criminals. Most of the sex offenders that we know come from all socioeconomic classes. They're from different ethnicities, ages, groups, education levels, all the way from doctors and lawyers, law enforcement, all the way down to, you know, an individual who may not be employed and out on the streets. Most sex offenders lead average, normal lives. They really do. And 93% of them are people you know. 93%. That's a high percentile. So you have to realize that it's your babysitters. It's the next door neighbor's kid that maybe knows another friend that you've had acquaintance with. It's not the guy jumping out of the bushes. We have them. I'm not saying we don't. But most of the MOs of these guys, their modus operandi or how they work, is they like to get the person and they want to groom them. That's half the fun. It's sick, but that's the way it goes. They'll get into a family with kids, they'll get their trust, they'll help them out financially, they'll do all these things for them, and then they'll start assaulting. This can take place over years. Most of these people we don't catch, they're very smart. The ones we do, we have these meetings, we have these organizational things to try to inform you to keep you safe. The legislature is what makes all this work. We're the front lines. We're your protection. We're just enforcing the laws that these guys make in your behalf. So one thing I do ask is everybody up here, these guys work on the lines more than I do. Don't yell at them. They're just trying to take care of you guys and make sure that the line of defense is strong enough for these guys not to get through. The people down in Madison are the ones that make these rules. So I just ask that you take consideration of that when the questions come around and be respectful. I've seen some of these meetings go bad, and I'd like this one to be a nice one. So, again, the registry, if you want to look up, I've got all the websites in there. The big thing that I think you should do today is when you get done is look up the websites.
It's on your pen.
What's that? It's on the pen over there, but just in case, there's a couple others on there. There's a Family Watchdog. I think that might be on there. And it's on the little pen and all the pamphlets. But the Watchdog program, the Family Watchdog site is really good. You can go right in there and type in your address or your zip code. It'll show your house if you put your address and all the sex offenders that live around you. Some people don't want to do that because it scares them. But I'd rather know where they are than not. But you can do that to just see who's all in your area and who all is in your neighborhood. And these individuals may be on or not on supervision. Other things that this registry might do, we also pair up with the U.S. Marshals on occasion. We go out and we make sure these guys are living where they're supposed to be living. We can't do that very often because the resources are tight. Governments are shut down, but we try to get out with them a couple times a year and search the individuals who are not on supervision. Verify the residents, and if they're not living there, we go find them. But make sure to go on those sites and check that stuff out. Law enforcement has the ability to notify you of anybody on supervision out in the community. We have juvenile protections for people who are under the age of 18 that committed sexual offenses. Law enforcement has the ability to tell you that information. We do not. That's just the way our government's set up in the laws. So if there's a question about a juvenile, we may refer you to the sheriff or somebody in your local municipality, law enforcement, to take care of that. They may be able to answer it, but we can't. So we don't want you to make you think like we're trying to avoid the question. The levels for tonight for notification, there's 3 levels that we talk about. A level 1 is for law enforcement only. Law enforcement finds out about a guy that's maybe getting out, doesn't feel everybody needs to know. Level 2 is targeted. They may do daycares, surrounding neighborhood, and we're at a level 3. This is a community notification meeting. So we let people know on television, local media. We invite people to come in and talk. The other things that we have to monitor, we monitor the internet. Anybody who's on internet, Facebook, all those things have to be reported to us if they're a sexual offender. If they abuse that, or if we catch them lying or using a false name, they can be charged with a felony. They cannot work with children under the age of 16 or volunteer with children under the age of 16 or work with them. If that's found out knowingly they're violating that, they could be charged with a felony as well. Almost all the charges for violating the sex offender registry results in a felony. Only certain instances. And a person cannot change his or her name. Believe it or not, there's a lot of females out there who have committed sexual assaults. They're being convicted on more and more here as the time goes on. Those individuals cannot change their name, so if they get married and change their name, they can be charged with a felony. Other than that, all the felonies, sexual assault felonies, almost all of them are going to require some kind of registration, whether it be life or it be 15 years. There are also other crimes that we put people on the registry for. They usually have a sexual connotation to them, but they can be crimes against bodily life and bodily security, crimes against sexual morality, or crimes against children, not guilty by reason of mental disease, certain crimes against property, and invasion of privacy. So if you have any questions, I'm going to be here after. There's going to be a lot of good information given here by all our panel. I'm going to be here afterwards. Again, make sure to take that information for you. A lot of the questions you're going to have about the registry will be in there, and all my contact is there, contact information, including my phone number. Please call me with any questions. These guys, I've worked with almost all of them, and it's a great group of guys. So thank you very much for showing up, and we will get on to see what's going on here next.
Go ahead.
My name is Sean Morrow. I also manage the state probation parole office here. I actually live in Point. One of the things that Peter's going to have to do, he's going to have active GPS so that we can follow him in real time. He's going to have and he's also not. He cannot go anywhere unless he has a state paid minder. So he cannot leave his house. He can't go anywhere unless he has a minder with him. The state pays for that, so that he can't go in. He cannot go into town. He can't go to a restaurant. He can't go to church. He is in essence on lockdown at his house. The minder that he has to set up his hours with them. To like go to his rehab, go to any other appointments that he may also have. He will not have internet at his house. He will basically be at his house. The only thing that he could do outside, he could like perhaps smoke outside, but that's really it. He's going to have drug tests as well. He will be seen almost every single day, if not every day, a couple times a day with the minders that he has to make sure that he's doing what he needs. And if he is not doing what he needs, then he will have a warrant out for his arrest, and he will be placed in, and he will also be placed in jail. The bands that they have on their ankle are very hard to actually cut off, and the band will know if someone's trying to cut them off, and there's a warrant sent out immediately. So if he tries to run or do anything, we're going to also know. The one thing about Peter, as well as he has been locked up for about 23 years. And as a 980, you can petition to get out every single year. And very few of these guys are able to really get out because they are aware of all of the rules that they have and what they are expected to do. So for him to get this far shows that he's been doing a lot of good things. That does not forgive him for what he has also done, but he has jumped through a lot. He has jumped through a lot of hoops, and he knows exactly what he's also getting into as well. I have been in contact with the sheriff's department throughout this entire thing here, and I've been in contact with Albin, Mike Wright, so that everyone can be informed. Because I know this isn't easy on anyone. I just found out of his release on December 5th. So trying to get everything ready before the holidays and so on. I will also be here at the end to answer any questions you may have. And one thing that Kurt did bring up was a lot of the sex offenders that I see, almost all the sex offenders that I see, they are the people that you know. I mean, it's the people that it's not the people you see on Nancy Grace. It's someone that you know, you trust. The boyfriend, the girlfriend, the stepmom, stepdad, baseball coach. I mean, those are the ones that groom. It's not the one that jumps out of the bushes or pulls your kid out of a park. And these are things that I see. This isn't research. This is what I see here, and this is what I saw in Green Bay as well. If you have any questions at the end, I'll be around also. Thank you.
Jason, one more second. Just before we get going to, I don't know, Louis, did you want to say anything to our district attorney? I think, the one thing I want to state before we get into the other presentation is, as a sheriff here, I wasn't even notified of this hearing for this individual. The one individual that we were notified, the co-op and some people showed up, and our local judge turned that down because of the co-op here in regards to the family event. So I was just as shocked as everyone here in regards to outside judge from a different county approving this. So I have been talking to the Attorney General in regards to how we can stop this from occurring in our county. I'm the first one to say, if it's somebody that occurs in our county, we have to take care of our county. And I believe that's part of our obligation here. But I don't believe it's our obligation to be taking all these people from coming from out of county, coming in our county. So I am working on that from my aspect, and I've asked the district attorney to assist me on this so that we can try to curb this in the future from occurring. So do you want to mention anything quick before, Jason?
Hello, my name is Louis Malevsky, Elton Stevens, when I'm your district attorney. The sheriff's right. The legislature in the past session around March passed a new law that essentially says that if they cannot find placement options for these individuals who have served their criminal sentence, as you heard, this person is off a criminal sentence. They were sentenced by a Washington County judge near Milwaukee. That person was then reviewed under Chapter 980 under the Department of Health Services because this person was believed to be sexually violent. They're not your average run-of-the-mill person. He was deemed to be sexually violent. He was committed under the Department of Health Services. The U.S. Supreme Court says that is lawful to continue a sentence after you've served it because they're essentially being mentally committed, civilly. And he has been mentally committed in Sandridge. You've heard of that facility? There's one facility like that in the state. And how the law works is that it's a balance, which means that the law must allow the person the right to seek release, supervised release, or complete non-supervision. And as the sheriff and others have taught you, that's what this person did, and that's what Charlie Anderson did, where Judge Flugar denied his release because of this facility, being a community center and under the statute where children may be present. He found that, made that finding. Fortunately, in Washington County, the judge reviewed the same facility and found in his determination that that fact did not exist. That the community center is not specifically listed in the statute, and the judge made that finding and did not have to follow our judge's ruling. And I got to tell you, I did call Representative Bourne, B-O-R-N, who is the author of this bill. It was a very partisan bill. Only Republicans supported it, and every Democrat voted against it in the legislature. And I talked to him about, I used to serve there for 10 years. And I said, look, you can have one judge make a finding, and then only a few months later or weeks later, the same findings made, and the judge does not have to consider the first judge's findings. That makes no sense. So in other words, the problem with this law currently is the hot potatoes move around, right? And what we're very worried about, Sheriff and others, is that since we're a rural county, more people will come here because of the fact that we have more areas where there are schools, daycares, and things like that. So the effect of the law, as I told the representative, is that Milwaukee County, very urban, essentially you will be able to make those findings where you have to do a statewide search. And that's what the law says, that all these ordinances that say you can't have a sex offender, the law supersedes all those. And if you cannot find a geographical match or a residence in your county, the judge made that order a statewide search is what the department did. And they're following the law. They're doing what the legislature said. So that's what happened in this case. So from my perspective as DA, one of the things that I've talked to is I want that law to be addressed next session. Now I'll work with them as the head of the Wisconsin District Attorneys Association in that regard. The other thing I want you to know about is that sex offenders that do violate it in our county on non-reporting, when they move their address, if they're on the internet, if they're in a relationship and they're not properly reporting that, we prosecute those cases. We've prosecuted several since I've been the district attorney, and we've updated our list of people who are non-compliant. There were people who were at 15 years of non-compliance. They're been out of the system for years and years and years. They moved back to Wisconsin, for example. So we prosecute them. We recently prosecuted someone who was in a relationship with a young girl over the internet, and he went back to prison for another 3 years, and he is still under supervision. So that's what I do on my end, prosecuting these people. And the sheriff obviously has the enforcement aspect, and then the Department of Corrections and Health Services. So your pain and your concern, we had our meeting to discuss this meeting, very much the conundrum of how can we have already gone, we went through this once, and now we're back here again. And that's something that needs to be changed. Because I believe if you have an offender in your community, you're going to ultimately have to deal with that person as they come back to your county of origin. But we can't have everybody coming in here, because that's it's really not fair to the taxpayers and the people of this community. So that's my comments. I'm here if you have any questions afterwards too.
Good evening. My name is Jason Cram. I work for the State of Wisconsin Department of Health Services. I am the program director supervisor for the Supervised Release Program, and that's the program that Yogerst is currently under. I'll reiterate some of the things that Department of Corrections and the DA had said, just because it's part of my presentation. So I apologize for being slightly redundant. So the way the process works is the person commits the crime, and then they are incarcerated for however long the state has sentenced them for into a state correctional facility. And so once they reach their end of confinement, they get reviewed. If they're a sex offender, they can be reviewed. And if they are found to be, if they meet certain statutory criteria, for example, they've committed certain crimes, and they also have a mental disorder that drives them to commit sexual offenses. When I say mental disorder, I don't typically mean things like schizophrenia or bipolar. I mean things like perhaps pedophilia or paraphilia. So they have this disorder, they've committed their crimes, and so the evaluators, the psychologists, evaluate them and make a determination and say that they believe that this person is more likely than not to commit a sexual offense if they're released. And so the evaluators, the psychologists, will take that to the court. Everything we do is a court process, by the way. Every step of the way, it's a court process. The evaluators will take that to the court, and the judge will make a determination and say, yes or no, this person should be committed under Chapter 980 or should not be committed under Chapter 980. In Yoger's case, Mr. Yoger's case, he was committed. Once a person is committed under Chapter 980, they are then sent to a place called Sand Ridge Secure Treatment Center in Boston, which is kind of near Toma. And they are committed for an indeterminate period of time, meaning the person could be committed the rest of their life. As Sean from the DOC office said, they do have the opportunity to petition the court annually for either discharge or supervised release. You can liken someone on supervised release to someone on, say, parole, meaning they're not free citizens of the state of Wisconsin. They have a lot of authority over them. If the person were discharged, the only authority over this person would be he has to comply the rest of his life with the sex offender registration program, no matter where he lives in the world. And if he lives in Wisconsin, even if he's discharged, he must be under GPS the rest of his life as well. So I'm getting ahead of myself. So he was committed. He was sent to Sand Ridge. At some point in time, he petitioned the court, and the court in Washington County granted him the privilege, a privilege to reside in the community. That order was made in 2015, October 2015. My department, my program looked and looked and looked in Washington County, and we continue to look in Washington County, in fact. At some point in time, his defense attorney said, look, if the state can't do their job and find a place for him in Washington County, then we ask the court to order the state, DHS, to look everywhere in Wisconsin. In some instances, the courts will say, no, we only want you to look in XYZ counties. In this instance, the court said, we want you to look everywhere in Wisconsin. As the DA said, there was another individual from Portage County who was ordered, pretty much the same situation, meaning convicted, incarcerated, committed, sent to Sand Ridge, put on supervised release. And so we looked in Portage County for this individual, located this residence, and presented that information to the court. And the court, in that instance, yes, in fact, denied the residence. Pretty much at the same time, we proposed the residence for this individual as well. We don't typically, in fact, we never have, not to say we never will, but we never have placed an out-of-county person into a county where there wasn't already another 980 person, meaning into another residence. We very often place two people together, by the way, and the reason being is twofold. Number one, it's a cost savings, and it's a cost savings to the taxpayer of the state of Wisconsin, i.e. all of us here. Number two, there are some benefits to the clients to be placed together. They have a little bit of companionship, otherwise they have a lot of isolation. And also we find that they do tend to tell on each other more often, of course, and that's a side benefit, but that is a benefit. So the other individual, of course, was denied to be placed there because of the proximity of actually this building here. And the court in Washington County approved the plan, and so we proceeded with the plan, and that plan was approved was on December 5th, and immediately the next day we notified all the necessary parties, meaning DOC, SORP, and the Sheriff's Department, that there was a person that a court had approved to place in this residence. Let me go through a few things as to what his life will be like now. By the way, first of all, he is actually under concurrent DOC supervision. He's committed to the state of Wisconsin under Chapter 980, DHS, for an indeterminate period of time. At some point in time, Yogerst could be discharged, but he also has concurrent DOC supervision up through, it's just for a couple more months, or a year, right? 2018, yeah. February 15th, so a little more than a year. In Wisconsin, now we're talking about these 980 people. I keep referring to them as 980 people. What Kurt Radetsky here said, he had mentioned the number of sex offenders who are in Portage County. What he didn't mention were the number of sex offenders in Wisconsin. There are currently, number of Wisconsin people, number of registrants. So these are anybody who has to register, whether they be incarcerated, whether they be under DOC supervision, or whether they be free citizens who still have to register. There are 24,438 sex offenders who have to register in Wisconsin. Of those, about 6,000 are in prison, almost 6,000 are on supervision, and the remaining 12,000 or so are they just have to register. And those are for either life or for 15 years. And that kind of gives you an indication of the number of sex offenders we have living amongst us. As the DA said, these are I'm not going to quote directly, but these aren't your garden variety sex offenders. These are a pretty unique group of people. In Wisconsin, there are only about 400, give or take, people committed under Chapter 980 total in the entire state of Wisconsin, compared to the 24,438 registrants. The 400 people are part of that number, but obviously a very, very small fraction of that number. About 350 of those 400 live at Sand Ridge, the only facility in Wisconsin that currently treats sexually violent persons. The other 50 or so are living in the community, all over Wisconsin, all in different communities. Yogerst will be the only person on supervised release living in Portage County. And as you can imagine, we have people living more, the number of commitments, for the most part, people live in their county of residence. The number of commitments are obviously going to be in the more heavily populated areas, Milwaukee, Madison, Green Bay, Fox Valley, things like that. But we have individuals living in Ashland County, La Crosse County, Eau Claire County, so they're all over. Since Chapter 980 has been in existence around the mid-90s, around 1995, there have been about 150, 160 some people placed on supervised release. Of those 150, 160 some, about a third of them currently are on supervised release. I said 50 earlier, so it's about a third of them. Of those 150, 160, about a third of them have been discharged, meaning they've just been outright discharged and they are essentially free citizens of wherever they're residing, other than the fact that if they live in Wisconsin, they have to have GPS the rest of their lives and sort the rest of their lives, no matter where they live. And about a third of them have been revoked, meaning they've had their privileges to live in the community taken away from them by the court because we, DHS, have taken to the court violations that we believe lead to the person not having the privilege to live in the community. Of those 50 or so people who've been revoked, 3 of them were for new sexual offenses. And of those 3, every single one of them knew their victim. Let me go over a couple things that, well, like I said before, about Mr. Yogerst here. He'll be jointly supervised by DHS and DOC, Department of Corrections. There'll be an assigned agent, and one of my staff will be assigned as well. No matter where he goes within the first year, let me clarify this. No matter where he goes within the first year of his placement, he has to be chaperoned. After the first year, by law, he doesn't have to be chaperoned, but quite possibly he will be. That'll be based upon the determination of DOC and DHS. Within that first year, he can only leave his house for about 6 different things. Sex offender treatment, which we all want him to participate in. Every week he goes to SOT with a qualified provider that we vet, that DHS vets. DOC supervision, grocery shopping, medical, religion, home maintenance, exercise, and employment. He can also go for school if he gets the permission to do so. Home maintenance means snow shoveling and lawn mowing. It used to be that we had to hire somebody to do that. Obviously, it's much more cost effective if he does it himself. However, still within that first year, even if he goes outside to do home maintenance, he has to have a chaperone with him. As Sean said, the chaperone is a contracted chaperone. And that after the first year, it's still a contracted chaperone. Although after the first year, if he leaves his house, if he does identify someone who DHS and DOC approves, it could be someone volunteer, but not in that first year. His life doesn't change after that first year. Really what changes is that the law says he doesn't have to be chaperoned. Everything else stays the same. He'll be supervised at the intensive level of supervision with DOC for the duration of his time on supervised release. Meaning he'll see an agent 4 times a month, I think is the minimum.
Yeah, at least.
Usually weekly. Some of those are home visits. He'll be in SOT, sex offender treatment, the rest of his time on supervised release. He will be expected to contribute to the cost of his care based upon his ability to pay, meaning any kind of benefits he receives goes to the cost of his care. If he does get a job, that money goes to the cost of his care, meaning it goes to offset the cost. By the way, the cost to be on supervised release is about $70,000 per person per year. The cost to live at Sand Ridge is about $150,000 per person per year. Who pays for all that? Of course, we do as taxpayers of the state of Wisconsin. For those of you who live nearby, in addition to the chaperoning that he must participate in, but by the way, like we said, if he leaves his residence, we will most likely know it because he's on GPS. If he steps outside to get his mail, let's say I'm sure his mailbox is on the road, but let's say he steps outside, we may not know that. The GPS may not pick that up, we'll be honest. But if he leaves his residence by any kind of significant distance, 20, 30 feet, is that about it, right?
He will have exclusion zones. So if he goes past one, so if he goes anywhere where he should not end up being, that's going to trip. That's going to.
And how far does that go?
We'll have questions at the end.
So we can draw the GPS, unlike what we were saying before, we said he may or may not be on electronic monitoring, which is another form of electronic surveillance. He'll definitely be on GPS because that's statutorily required. GPS, we can actually draw squares. EMP, the electronic monitoring, can only be done more like a circle. But in addition to the GPS, in addition to the being chaperoned, in addition to being supervised, he also will have random monitoring checks done on his residence. Initially, it could be up about 3 times a day, and then over time, those will be decreased. Could be decreased, not necessarily. And the random monitoring checks are this. The same agency that does the chaperoning conducts the random monitoring checks. They go into the residence because DHS is actually the leaseholder. We are the ones who sign the lease, not Mr. Yogerst. And so what these people do will go into the house randomly, not random to us, but random to the client, day or night, and check to make sure that he's not doing anything he's not supposed to be doing, because the GPS is only as good as, all it does is tell us where he's at. It doesn't tell us who he's with or what he's doing. But the random monitoring people will be able to just check on him to make sure he's not doing anything he shouldn't be doing, and that there's no one there who shouldn't be there. Those are done, like I said, day or night. And so those of you who live nearby, don't be shocked if you see cars there, perhaps like 2 in the morning. Most likely you'll see the same vehicles, 1 or 2 vehicles there, because it's the same people who do the job. He has to comply with 72 rules of supervision. If he fails to comply with those rules, which I'll be happy to share them with you, I can email you a copy. I also have 1 copy to share. But they cover all aspects of his life. Anything from accessing the internet to spending his money to who he can have a relationship with. They cover, like I said, all aspects of his life. If he fails to comply with the rules of supervision, our response is measured. If, let's say, for example, he smokes, he purchases a pack of cigarettes and he wasn't authorized to do so. Are we going to put him in jail for that? Unlikely. If he does it 10 times in a row, then we might request the court put him in jail. Let's say he does something that is offense paralleling, meaning it looks like his behaviors are going down a path that could lead to a new offense. We will definitely be requesting that he be put in jail. And the request is done like this. Collectively, DHS and DOC put a warrant out for his arrest. That warrant goes to the Sheriff's Department, and I'm assuming the Sheriff would pick him up fairly quickly. He'd be detained in initially Portage County, but because he's from Washington County, we would work with Portage and Washington County to decide where he goes from there. If his behaviors are such that we do not believe he should be in the community, we will petition the court to revoke his supervised release. And again, it's a court process. Although I can't remember a time when we pursued a revocation that we did not prevail. That meaning we did not get the revocation, meaning the court actually did grant it. He will be expected to be employed if he's an able-bodied individual, so he'll be expected to be employed. Most of our guys do not find employment in the first year because they have to have that chaperone with them, so most employers are not going to want to hire somebody that has to have someone standing next to them all the time. Typical jobs that these guys get, we have people who make pallets, we have people who are welders, we have people who work on farms. We do not let people work with any children, obviously, no fast food, things like that. Greenhouses, landscaping, those kinds of jobs are pretty typical. Just two more things for me. So I am standing here at the privilege of law enforcement. I could not be here tonight if law enforcement did not invite us here. I want to mention that first year thing again. And I want to stress that on day 366, everything doesn't change for him. He's still supervised at an intensive level. What changes is that he may be permitted to go get, for example, his mail. He may be permitted to go shovel his snow without a chaperone. Will he be able to drive on day 366? Highly unlikely. Could he drive sometime in the future? Yes. And I'll mention that as to why in a moment. But on day 366, it's highly unlikely. I've only seen one case. I presented at about 50 of these meetings. I've only seen one case where law enforcement had a follow-up meeting a year later. So if you notice things changing in a year or so, call us. Call DOC. Call SORT. We'll be able to answer your questions, but it's highly unlikely that we'll be back here again to talk about the nuanced changes. Final two things. We have two goals on supervised release. And these depart a little bit from other states. In other states, they use what's called a containment approach, meaning polygraph, which, by the way, he'll be polygraphed at least annually, typically probably 2 or 3 times a year. Polygraph, supervision, and treatment. We have those three. But we also have this fourth piece to it, so I wouldn't call it, it's not a containment triangle for us, it's more like a diamond. And that's where things are a little different, because Yogerst, like I was saying before, like I opened up with my presentation, there's a possibility he'll be discharged at some point in time. Yogerst has spent a very long time incarcerated. A very long time. I'm not asking for you to feel sympathy for him either. I'm just pointing out the facts. A very long time at Sand Ridge. Basically a good part of his adult life. He has no idea how to live in the community. That's what supervised release is for, is to help them take those skills that they learned at Sand Ridge and apply them to the community in such a way that we have two goals. Community safety is first and foremost. That is our first and foremost goal. The other piece, though, is community reintegration. Mr. Yogerst will never be fully integrated into any community where he lives. I'll answer one. I know there'll be a question. When he discharges, will he continue to live there? No, because we hold the lease. We will not let people live in a residence where we hold that lease. So when I'm talking about getting a vehicle, when I'm talking about a job, when I'm talking about perhaps going to school or going grocery shopping or going to the doctor, those are all things that we all do every single day or every single week or whatever. That's part of our lives. Those are things that he pretty much hasn't had to do. Treatment, he had to go to treatment, but not community treatment. when he was incarcerated. So our goals are community safety, and our second goal is reintegration. And that's why we push these things along, keeping in mind, first and foremost, community safety, but also we need to make him prepared to the best of our ability for that time when he is discharged, most likely be discharged, and living amongst, if not you, but other citizens in Wisconsin. Thank you.
Okay, let's take a couple minutes here so that we can collect the cards. So if you haven't written down any questions or you want to write down one, write one down. At 20 after, we'll resume again and we'll start answering some of the questions.